Hello to the community, all the community of Barcelona Technology School. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Jordi Arrufí. I am currently director of the Master in Digital Transformation Leadership. I do collaborate also in the Master in Digital Healthcare. And it's a pleasure to me to welcome to Fernando Valenzuela. Fernando, how are you?
I'm great, Jordi, and thank you for the invitation. Excited to be here.
Good. Well, actually, Fernando is physically now in Barcelona because this week happened in Barcelona the World Education or Higher Education Congress of UNESCO, which is something that doesn't happen every day. Actually, it only happens every 10 years and is a worldwide congress that sets the work streams or the guidelines for the higher education in the years to come, usually for the next decade. And Fernando was here presenting, among other things, but presenting a report about the future of higher education. It's a report that actually I had the pleasure to be able to collaborate with Fernando with that. Okay, he was leading this report, and he will give some insights and vision about how we envision this future of the higher education and the EdTech industry. Actually, Fernando, I was reviewing your LinkedIn, and I told you I'm not going to ask you about reviewing your curriculum because it's pretty long. You've been founder of many companies, institutions in EdTech and education. You're board member of many institutions in higher education, in EdTech, and so on. By the way, you've been recently awarded in the category of leadership in the Global EdTech Awards, one of the most prestigious ones, right? This is right, Fernando?
Yeah, this is correct. A few weeks ago, I was named Visionary of the Year for the EdTech Digest in a magazine that gives this award every year. So I was really honored to receive this nomination.
Good, Fernando. You're actually based usually in Mexico. You're born in Mexico, even though you're always traveling around, right, with the community of EdTech leaders.
Yeah, and I have been fortunate to have lived in Brazil, in Colombia, Miami, many different places. So kind of my mind is always regional and not linked to any singular place.
By the way, Fernando, when I was checking your LinkedIn, I was surprised that at the very bottom, after all this experience in software companies, in telco companies, in EdTech companies, in leading positions, it says professional football player. Is it right?
Yes, I played professionally for 3 years in Mexico for a couple of teams. And I also have my professional degree as a coach. So someday I'm going to coach, I don't know, Barca maybe.
Good. This is there's maybe a vacancy in the near future in Barca coach. Okay. By the way, I don't know what did you study, what is your background in terms of university, but I would like to ask you to what extent this degree that you took years ago actually was influenced in your success in your professional career.
No, I think I was part of this initial generation that started looking at computer science and on the software side. And so my generation was one of the early ones that studied computer science, not from a hardware perspective, but more from a software perspective. And that really, it was a risk. I remember people asking me, what is that career? Why are you studying that? What is that new thing that is coming? So I think I was fortunate to be on the early stages of digital transformation. One of my first internships was working with Hewlett-Packard, and I was teaching them how to use the mouse. Imagine that. And folks that were working in Hewlett-Packard, were lost with the mouse. They would go really far away and they didn't know how to come back. So that was the time I started.
So then it was very useful to you.
Yeah, it definitely allowed me to get into the forefront of technology, to be kind of part of, it was that time where computers needed someone to tell them what to do. In previous generations, the computers were already programmed. They were already set to do a number of things. And the time where computers began to be responding to individuals, to their own applications, their own software, and that created kind of the first digital transformation in my mind, because people had to relate with computers on a totally different way, not reactive, but more active and more, proactive in the things. So what are you going to use technology for?
Good. Fernando, if you have to choose 3 hashtags that defines your career, I mean, in terms of professional career, among all those, let's say, experiences that you have leading companies, helping companies also to thrive, even a lecturer, and so on and so on, which one would be your 3 main hashtags that you would choose in order to define yourself or your job career?
So definitely, I think I would be collaboration would be one, learning from people rather than classes. The other one is about rethinking the future, always change management. And also, I would say imagination would be the third one. So something that you always need to imagine and then pursue that thing that you imagine to do. So those would be the ones.
Good. So are also skills that probably you have, right? So you have the experience to collaborate, to manage your own change, right? And mindset, but also third parties changes, and also imagination, which probably something that we will keep doing better than machines, right? In the years to come, hopefully.
Yeah, I think we are going through a very unique time, and that unique time is going to require us to relate to technology and to augment our capabilities with technology, but at the same time to develop new humanity skills. And this has a number of studies that are today defining how, let's say, in the past, the important thing was for you to know how to, right? Then in the industrial society and so on, you had to know what. So what makes things work? What are the processes and so on? And right now we're entering a new era where you need to know who and you need to know why. And it's at the same time of knowing what and how, knowing who and why become the most intensive skills. So I think this is very unique. It hadn't happened in humanity before. So these are the type of discussions and reflections that I think are worthwhile having at this time.
Okay, we will speak about that, about to who or with whom the universities and higher education will relate to in order to thrive, in order to drive value to the students, and also why, right? The purposeful university or the purposeful higher education institution. By the way, among all those experiences that you have, could you choose one, only a single project that it's you are especially proud of?
So I recently, a couple of years ago, I worked with the IDB, the Inter-America Development Bank, to develop what they call the Moonshot program. And the Moonshot, in my view, was to include and break the barriers that female talent had, especially for Latin America. And I was very, very proud of that work because that generated a whole movement where the IDB today does not invest in funds and in projects that are not representative by the female talent and is always looking to close those gaps. So I think that particular one had a major impact because I see this after a couple of years that, it initiated with this type of discussion and it has turned into billions of dollars being deployed, initiatives, programs that are now being executed. So it's like you drop the domino once and everything starts moving. So I think that is the one more impactful.
Good. So last question about your career. Would you, choose a single person that was very inspiring to you in order to, succeed, in order to thrive in your professional career?
Yeah, certainly. It was one of my ex-bosses, Ruben, an Argentinian, who was my boss for about 10 years in Hewlett-Packard and was my mentor for life. I think having a mentor in my time, it was not a common discussion. And this guy was really inspirational. He was the one that actually pointed me to move my career into education, where he said, I know that in the next 10 or 12 years, the next digital transformation is going to happen in education. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago with a very severe cancer, but up to that time, every single week I would speak with him. I would kind of get his thoughts. He would connect me to amazing people, amazing minds, and I think that was probably the single most influential person in my career.
Maybe you still think, what would Ruben say, right, in this a specific challenge or scenario?
Yeah, it's like I inherited a number of relationships that he opened for me, and all of those, and I can tell you that this is not a short number of people, probably dozens, or even probably 40, 50, 60 people that I met because of him, that we continually discuss things, we balance new ideas, and he's always kind of part of that conversation.
Good. So it's something that you would recommend to our audience, to have a mentor, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was a little bit of an accident. I think if you are intentionally looking for someone that you admire, someone, in his case, to be very, very explicit, he built himself up. He came from a kind of a tough environment. He used his education to grow. He used his curiosity to develop and to invent and to explore and take risks. And he became the worldwide vice president of Hewlett-Packard globally in the consulting business. So in that view, I said, if someone can build himself the way Ruben did, I think this is what you can inspire to achieve. There are no limits. There is no boundaries. He ended up living in Miami, and when you look at where he was born, where did he study, how he developed his initial career, it was like totally surprising, sorry, to feel that he got to that level of achievement.
Good, fantastic, good inspiration. So, and you say that he encouraged you to join this industry of education because actually was one of the most emerging in terms of digitization, probably, right? So let's address this topic, which is our hot and main topic for today. Fernando, imagine that we will have now a time machine, okay? So we were able to go back maybe 5 or 6 centuries, okay, before. So back in time, and we will pick someone, random on the street, and we'll put him or her maybe inside an operations theater, okay? So where the surgeon operates nowadays and performs the surgery. Probably this person maybe wouldn't even know where she or he is, right? So because it's so different how much it changed the healthcare industry, and how, for instance, surgery is being performed, and all the machinery and all the software, and even these robots, Da Vinci robots, so they don't even operate directly, they do it through a robot that provides more accuracy, and so on and so on. And imagine that we take this very same person and we put him or her in the middle of a classroom in a university. Maybe not now, maybe let's say 2 years ago, before the pandemics. Do you think this person would recognize where he or she is? Like I'm in a university class?
I think it's very clear how the settings of the school and the university have not transformed to the way the rest of the world has. So I think what would probably find right now is that the level of disruption that a person born 100 years ago would find in a classroom would be none. I think they would only probably feel that there's a couple of projectors and machines that they didn't exist in terms of the drawing board. But other than that, just giving the class, having a lecture, people sitting, watching and listening, and just watching the back of the one that knows is too common still for the times we're living. So I think this is exactly what has been driven this discussion around a deep transformation in education. And I always connect this with the waste. I learned about waste when I was in computer science, and you had computer power, network power that was not used, and that was considered a waste. So I bring this into a university and say, what are we wasting in terms of space, time, knowledge, student potential, discussion, inspiration. There is a lot of waste. And I think if we bring this mentality, we would really take deep questions to education.
Good, Fernando. So imagine that we take this very same person and now we use again our time machine and we will bring him or her to 2050. Okay, so in 20 to 30 years from now, what do you imagine this person will find there in the campus? Let's start with the campus. I know that in this report that we recently published, we address many topics. So how will be the campus of the future, about the lifelong learning, about the customization. Let's start about this merging between the physical, the digital part, the several layers of the future of education. So how do you envision this future of the campus of the university?
Yeah, so the first thing that I see is that the physical space and the digital space will blend, and you would not have one single experience where it's only physical, only digital. It would complement, and this is what we try to express in our report. We said the university is going to retain a core, is going to have the knowledge, the philosophy, the purpose, but within that you're going to have a fully physical experience, an experience that it would be augmented or complemented by technology. Then you would have a fully massive digital experience, and then you keep going on those layers until you find yourself in the metaverse. And all of this is probably happening for the same students in different periods of time, different stages of life. So this idea that you play at one age, then you go to school, then you go to a university, then you go to work, and then you have a time for learning, a time for playing, a time for working. I think all of that has collapsed. So the time of playing, learning, and working is all the time for the rest of your life. And this is why I think you do not enroll in a university. You subscribe to the university at different stages of your life.
So Fernando, you're suggesting that beyond Spotify and Netflix, we will have also the university subscription, another subscription, the life as a service, but also knowledge as a service?
Yeah, and you would not subscribe to one single university in one country or to one type of university or one type of learning. You're going to be subscribed to many different things that are considered learning, that are helping you grow, helping you develop skills. So all of these has to be recognized, validated, and integrated into your own profile. And that is the point of entrance to your next subscription. So you never subscribe, at the same level all the time. You're continuously building new abilities, new skills, new experiences.
Okay, we will go back to this point, later on. But you were mentioning about this layered school, university, any educational institutions in which you have the core, and then you add several digital layers, and at the top and the other extreme you have the metaverse. So it's the full digital campus, for instance, or the full digital experience. Fernando, you have a quite long experience and expertise in the technology industry, and probably you're very aware about the famous Gartner hype cycle. So every single technology starts with these inflated expectations where we believe that this is going to change everything, and then we face this plateau in which technology is looking for or is meeting where it actually provides value, and where market says, okay, I will pay for it because it makes sense, right? And I'm sure that you have experienced that with many technologies so far. Some of them we already forgot about those technologies, but some of them actually made the expectations. What do you think about the metaverse in education? You think it is going to be a big thing?
Yeah, I think this term has been misused, and it's probably not kind of the first time that this metaverse is being discussed. So I believe that, if I compare this to the hype that you mentioned of technology from Gartner, this is not a technology. This is a combination of things that are happening for the first time in humanity. So the Web3, the blockchain, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, all of those combined are going to create a setting, and it's unstoppable. You just have to take a look at the amount of billions of dollars that are being invested in technology, and within that, the amount of billions of dollars that are invested in education technology. For the first time last year, education technology reached about $21 billion. But if you put that into cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, this blend between physical products and digital products, the phygital space that is happening in retail, the things that are being invested in gaming, blockchain. So it's not one hype of one technology. It's going to be an environment fully digitized that we're going to be more active or more passively related to. And to me, that is what the metaverse is a relationship between a human being and technology under different circumstances where you're going to decide that you're going to be more actively using technology, or technology passively is going to augment your experience. So this is why it's different than one single hype of technology, in my view.
And Fernando, we discussed a lot about there's certain things that actually are better for real than in the metaverse. Just to choose an example, for instance, having a beer with friends, probably you will agree with me that it's better, in person than digitally. Maybe in the future, not, but actually, at least in the years to come, it will still be better, right? So most of the good things of life are better physically. So which things do you think in education that will still be better in terms of outcomes and performance better than the virtual side?
Well, let me give you a few data points that to me are very compelling. If you take one teacher in 20 years of career, that teacher would probably touch 3,000 people in 20 years without technology. When you do that with technology, a teacher today is able to touch millions of students. So if you replace the knowledge sharing of a teacher with technology, probably nobody would notice. Probably you're going to be able to select the best teachers in the world to teach you the best content in the world. So we are in an abundance of content, but a scarcity of experiences. And that is, to me, the most relevant. So teachers become the most influential role, but not to provide content, rather to help students during difficult times, to motivate, to help them guide their dreams, their curiosity, to help them connect with relevant people, to augment their trust in themselves, their confidence to experiment things. So I think this is the major change. It's not a technological change. It's how do you make the teacher role more human and to be able to embrace the connection that is emotional and that is motivational, rather than the abundance of content that you can select the best teachers that tell you the best way the content that you want. So I think this is very compelling, and teachers, I know I have friends teaching to 5 million students today using TikTok, using Twitch, using different programs. So I think this is the reality right now.
Yeah, because Fernando, as you were mentioning, other industries were disrupted earlier than the education. And one of the main disruptions was the platform economy. So all of a sudden, platforms are very efficient to multiply the relationship between the supply and the demand, and they're able to address or to distribute a single digital product to many, right? Or thousands or millions, as you mentioned. But apparently now the platform economy is also disrupting education. So we see how platforms like Coursera, EdTech, Udemy, and so on are able to distribute the content, but not only the content produced by universities. So my feeling is that the university is also losing the monopoly of the content production, right? Also, an individual is able to use this kind of platforms, or as you mentioned, TikTok and so on, and hold a community of millions of learners around the world, right? And sometimes university can think this is an opportunity because I can reach out new audiences, but on the other hand, it can be maybe a challenge in the sense that to what extent this is substituting, especially for those that keep focus on content, right? This substituting their core value proposition. So for those schools that won't change the role, to what extent actually maybe it's more interesting to shift into the virtual world offered by Coursera, for instance, right? So by the way, Fernando, we have a question regarding to that. He says, how skill up platforms led by tech giants such as Google grow are disrupting universities' value proposition? So it's very related to that.
Yeah, so first I would start by saying that no solution starts being a platform. They start being an application. They earn the right to become a platform if they solve a relevant problem at scale for many people on different layers. So I think this idea of designing a platform, I would really question that. I think you start with solving a need and you earn the right to become a platform. I think universities today and every single one of us as individuals would need a companion, would always have to try different sets and different formats of learning. So I believe that this is a complement, it's not a replacement. I think when the MOOCs started a few years ago, everybody said, everybody's going to leave the university and they're going to go to the MOOCs. What we're seeing now is that the MOOCs are part of the university, the boot camps are part of the university, the micro certificates are going to be part of the university, the informal learning processes will be part of the university. So it's a blend, it requires collaboration, it requires curation, and it also requires a careful balance between pedagogy, technology, capital, and impact. Because I think this is very important. People that understand pedagogy don't understand technology. People that understand technology don't understand pedagogy. Neither one of those understands capital and where to put the resources. And neither one of the three understands how to close the gaps using technology wisely. So I think this is the main discussion. This is the main challenge that we need to put in front of us, because I think we're going to be learning for many years at many stages with different formats. And this is what we call the multiversity, the moreversity, more courses, more segments, more formats for multiple segments, for multiple ages, multiple universities. So it sounds complex, but it's really just breaking the barriers that today artificially exist in universities.
Mm-hmm. And so, Fernando, your point of view is that those platforms are not actually replacing, or they're not actually a challenge at all. But in the report itself, we are identifying certain signals happening in the industry. For instance, companies creating their own content and sourcing it in a platform. For instance, recently it was Meta, along with Coursera, I think, that they launched programming courses, or language programming courses. It was Google a couple of years ago launching their own content and saying, okay, if you pass this course, you will be able to apply to a job vacancy in our company as equal as maybe a person holding a degree, right? So to what extent do you think this is just, a hype or emerging trend, or companies will end up creating their own content in order to, tailor-made their own employees?
No, and I would probably take this, Jordi, one step further. I mean, we're now a community or a generation of content creators. If you look at the content that is being created, you have about 47 millions of amateur creators that are probably working in a company, are probably creating things for their own. And then you have 2 million professionals of content creation in all of the different platforms. What I do see is that everyone is going to become a teacher. Everyone is going to become a platform. Everyone has something that has learned better than anyone else. So you're going to say, this is my Jordi Arrufí University because I had an experience that nobody else has had, and I'm going to share it in my own channel. And your channel, if it serves hundreds of millions, will become a platform. And this already happened with Salman Khan on Khan Academy. This is how it started Coursera and some others. Is we have great teachers, but they only reach 3,000 people. Let's have these great teachers reach millions of people. And I saw this in the book business. I was president of publishers, and they had like franchises of a guy that wrote a wonderful book on calculus, and there were many students that were learning on his textbook. Now, if you are able to build a wonderful class, you're going to have millions of students, as Sandro in TikTok. I urge you to take a look at Sandro Curio, a friend of mine in Brazil. 5 million students in TikTok learning math. It's amazing.
Good, Fernando. Nice insights. Another of the big transformations enabled by disruptive technologies that happening in other industries is, for instance, the hyper customization. So, for instance, we have a Spotify, suggesting our tailor-made music list every day, our daily mix, and they even have a pattern, right? That they want to suggest music according to our mood. And this pattern is based in listening and understanding our tone of voice. So if you are happy, maybe I will suggest you music that is fitted for happiness, while if you are sad, maybe I will suggest another kind of music. And this is happening, I believe, in many other industries. So digitization is enabling us to tailor-made the experience. And this could potentially happen also in education, because not all of us learn the same way. Not all of us, have the same capabilities. None of us have the same interests. And maybe digitization could provide us a better experience, a more tailor-made, according to our interests, our way of learning, maybe even in the market needs and so on. So how you envision the education industry will evolve in that sense?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think we are all worried about an algorithm, artificial intelligence, suggesting to us what we need to learn next, and who built that algorithm, and who audits that, and how it represents, and what is the type of data that is, it's flowing from the student to whomever decides on the algorithm. But I am even more scared about one teacher or a group of teachers from they're probably 60 years old, that are designing your learning at a university based on their curricula, based on their own experiences, and they assign you different texts that you need to read, that those texts were written 20 years ago, and that the university decides that the curriculum, you have to go calculus 1, then calculus 2, then accounting 1, then accounting 8, and this is what you need to learn. So I would much rather have an algorithm select to me what is my next best, and I have some decision and so on, than to have someone telling me that I should go study calculus 8 after I studied calculus 7, because this is not where I want to be. So the example I always give with this type of comments, Jordi, is take a look at your LinkedIn. I did this exercise a few months ago. Just find your own contacts and find how many of them are in positions and job posts that do not require a university or are not related with a career. You're going to find hundreds. This is not the future. We always say that we are preparing students for a future that hasn't been invented. I did this. I found thousands of contacts in LinkedIn that have a job description that does not match to any career in any university, any part of the world. And if that person leaves that job, the following person cannot fit that box. It's going to have something different because we become more individualized. So I think that is what we need to be discussing.
It is true, even though I assume that there are certain professions, maybe now there's a minority in which at least you need a certain knowledge. For instance, a physician, right, a doctor, probably you can tailor-made their learning experience, but at least needs to pass a certain knowledge, right? So how you imagine we have professions in which you have rather soft skills, so learn to learn. Will be a key, and be able to learn all the time. But maybe other professions, I don't know to what extent we have to be able to supply at least certain content, right?
Yeah, and again, it would have to be depending on how intensive the approach with technology is going to complement your capabilities. How many times have you visited a doctor who's a great physician but treats people poorly? So what if we have the great physician and the technical capability coming from a computer or someone in a centralized avatar that tells a physician what to do and how to diagnose. And we build physicians that are wonderful with treating people, right? Or the human side of that. So I think, lawyers, I think, physicians, nurses, and probably the government are the ones that are going to be slowly into this transformation. All the other functions, I think, are going to transform very, very quickly.
Yeah, actually, there are the big techs investing also in diagnosing diseases, also in predicting, in preventing, even in providing a tailor-made treatment. Because as you mentioned, right, technology enables you to create volume. So a machine or artificial intelligence is able to process thousands of millions, for instance, of images about cancer, while a doctor maybe in their entire life will be able, to see maybe thousands, but not as many millions as a machine does, right? And with machine learning, able to diagnose and tell to the doctor to, take the final decision. So probably we will have people, dealing with the machine instead of developing the entire end-to-end process. By the way, and speaking of which, we have another question. This is very, concrete question. I don't know if you have an answer, but you're a pretty expert in the EdTech industry, and this person is asking if you know any EdTech project focused on training teachers to understand health issues in children. So it's very, concrete, as I mentioned, and also to train teachers about innovations in healthcare that they might face in their practice. You can say no. You can say no.
I haven't seen. Let me just relate to an example. We did something with the government of Ecuador, building an app to train teachers about the world of technology. So there is a big space of opportunity in building these skills for teachers, preparing them to understand what the world is coming. So one of the best cases that I have seen is a set of universities that are having like an entrepreneur on site. And what happens is you probably have a chemistry teacher, but you have a chemistry entrepreneur that is pushing the limits of chemistry to build a company, a startup. When you match these two, then those teachers become totally sensible. So I think this idea of collaboration, open innovation, bringing a startup that is working in any area, agriculture, water, space, services, we have all of them. Those should be the teachers. And this is why the paper that was written by McKinsey a few months back that says, every single learner is going to have 3 objectives in 3 months and accompanied by 3 people, I think makes a lot of sense. Those 3 people have to be complementary. And that's how I would teach, I would do my teacher development. I would break this idea of one teacher owning a class, but rather one teacher complementing the class with at least other 2 people that have a more real world complementing them.
Thank you, Fernando. By the way, regarding to the healthcare industry, I have to say that in Barcelona, it was 3 or 4 years ago, we hosted the first operation, the first surgery that was enabled by 5G. So we had an expert surgeon that was mentoring another surgeon that they were, like a few miles away, right? And the company that enabled beyond the telecommunications infrastructure, the company that enabled the use case is called AIS. And this is a startup that actually is in the topic of training doctors, training physicians with VR. So they, for instance, are recording in real time a surgery while thousands or millions of people is able to, to follow up and to also learn from this process. We have another question from the discussion. Content and data will play a critical role in the education, like how other platform channels are working today. Let me review it. From the discussion, content and data will play a critical role in the education, like how other platform channels are working today. I guess this is a question.
Yeah, so let me react to that. I think it touches on a very relevant dimension, which is what I call the return of learning. You have to have several dimensions. Today you need return on learning and return on investment. They sound very reasonable and everybody kind of understands those two. But when you bring return on data, return on time, return on trust, return on impact into the whole equation, I think this is where the platforms, this is where the edtechs are going to have to play, because the idea is that you're going to have to use data to improve time, and time is an asset for education. Information is an asset for education. What did you learn that is able to change your next class, your next intervention? Trust is an asset. How are you using technology to build trust, to protect against bullying, against whatever, other challenges, or to trust that what you're learning is going to be relevant? So I think the initial idea is that education needs all of these returns acting in balance, and sometimes they're acting in conflict. Sometimes you do something for time that does not require or takes away from information or from trust or from impact. And I think this is a critical challenge to develop edtechs.
Good. Fernando, we are facing now the last part of our chat. You were saying actually that disruption is changing even the nature of work, right? So it's changing the skills that the market needs. Actually, according to World Economic Forum, most of the skills required by 2025, so not far away, are mostly digital, while there are also declining jobs. All kind of jobs, blue collar and white collars, that the artificial intelligence will either replace or will transform, right? The skills that the market will need. And this, probably due to digitization, will happen frequently, ongoing. So we'll have, as a software, to update ourselves. And this brings us to the long life learning concept and the idea of the subway. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think this, when we were discussing, what would flexible learning be about? What would lifelong learning be about? We came up with this idea of the subway. You enter the subway in whatever station is closer to you. And from there, you have a structure. You cannot go in any direction. You probably need to follow 2 or 3 or however number of stations to reach to your destination. And there are some points where you may cross from the blue lane to the red lane and maybe go 2 stops here and 3 more. I think education is exactly like that. You're going to enter education at whatever stage of life you're in the station that is closer to you. And this is a virtual station, this is an online station, this is a physical station, but you go into education like that, and then you're going to go to 2 stops, 5 stops, however time you want to evolve in that learning, and you're going to get some certificates, some skills, some abilities. If that was your goal, you reach your destination, you're probably not going to come back for a few months to learning. You're probably, the next subway is going to be 6 months from now. But if you need to continually build skills, you're going to jump to the next lane, you're going to jump to the next red line, and you're going to go to 3 certificates more. And the end of that route is your own journey. You're going to call your graduation, you're going to get your skills to get you to the next stage. And that is a continuous level. So you never stop going through the subway, going through routes, reaching destinations, because that's the way you grow, that's the way you work, that's the way you learn. And I think this is exactly the metaphor that we were looking for. And it was really kind of enlightening when we came to this model to say, this is very compelling. And now that I've discussed this with dozens of people from education spaces, it really creates resonance. It really builds trust that we can pursue this model.
Someone is saying, Fernando, that he or she loves the subway metaphor. So, Fernando, imagine that, okay, you join this subway, you take 3 stations, and then you get a certificate, maybe in a skills wallet or something like that, maybe secured in a blockchain, right? So you keep it for your entire life. But to what extent we will have interoperability? So maybe I started in BTS and took micro-credentials in BTS, and then I want to go to, I don't know, Harvard or Coursera. So to what extent, the several suppliers will, recognize and acknowledge the certificate of third parties, or how we are going to provide a governance of all this, skill set?
Exactly. And I think this is one of the critical elements. This has to do with regulation, validation. This was part of the report that we called it pathways and traces. You leave traces of your own path. And those traces need to be recognized, need to be validated, need to be recorded, most likely with blockchain. Somebody has to say, yeah, it was Jordi who went from station 1 to station 2. And then someone else is going to take that into consideration. We're opening the next station. So I think that is one of the critical elements. I think regulation, as always, if we were talking about autonomous cars, we would feel that regulation is well behind the innovation. So the same thing is happening in education. Regulation is well behind what needs to happen, and I think it's going to have to be updated at one point. But these are actually the good discussions that we need to have.
And probably, Fernando, we will see many startups, in the EdTech industry providing solutions, right? In this overall knowledge of skills, right? And creating passports that allow us to, bring and jump in from one station to another. Just, as a last question, one of the topics that we are facing in this report is the purposeful institution, right, or education institution, as it happens also in businesses, right? So nowadays, companies are measured not only by how much is their market value or market capitalization, about how much the revenue or earnings they make, but also about their purpose, and the purpose also makes them attractive to talent, for instance, right? Even they have certifications like this B Corp certification, right, that measures how sustainable you are, how impactful you are, and so on. We will see this also in education institutions. So educations that look for a purpose, they don't want only, the people they study there to get a good salary afterwards, but also to have a purpose, and also will take care of the, of the well-being of the students.
Yeah, I think this is a critical element. I think, we began by ranking institutions and universities by what they possess. It's very difficult that you rank a university with the quality of learning and teaching. So they typically rank them on research, things that they can measure. But I think that is also changing. I think, what you possess, the campus, the faculty, the content is really irrelevant. What is important is how do you apply, how do you build it? Who are you? What do you believe in? What is your purpose? What is your mission? What are your values? And most likely these new students are going to be attracted for more stages in their life to institutions where they share values. And this has a lot of dimensions. How do you deal with, gender gaps? How do you deal with diversity? How much you value diversity? How much you value the environment and sustainability? And all of these elements are going to be part of the decision-making for anybody to join an institution or to subscribe, as I say, for a number of months or a path in your institution.
And Fernando, you think this will happen also because I guess the set of values of the students itself is going to evolve that way, right?
Well, this is very much related to the chapter in our report, Jordi, where we touch upon the leadership and what I call from surviving to thriving in uncertainty. We are 7 years or 6 years away from having a new generation of leaders in the enterprises. So people that used to be, as they said, up the corporate ladder, and they went through one position to the next and so on, those generations are going to be replaced by CEOs of companies that basically began pivoting, doing prototypes. And so the way I see it is the prototype is going to beat the business plan. And with that generation becoming the new higher companies and the new CEOs, the university is not going to be able to respond to that, because this is going to be, they're not going to value what the diploma says. They're going to value what people are capable of doing. So I think this is why the chapter on new leadership, the chapter of universities acting closer to startups, connecting with open innovation initiatives, and just realizing that there is a new generation only 5 or 7 years ago that is going to completely change the business environment.
Thank you, Fernando. Just before we finish this talk, would you give a recommendation, to our audience, and advice to our audience that probably most of them are still studying? Maybe they don't know what to do with their careers. They don't know which one is going to be their next station in the subway. Would you give any recommendation to them?
Well, yeah, I have been amazed of this area that I recently learned, which is the study of the future. And I think this is an ability that every single individual should develop. You should be able to project yourself in the future. You should be able to say, there are many futures possible. Some of them are probably riskier. Some of these things are changing and I am not ready for that. So the ability to project yourself in the future and to aspire to become something that you can be, but you need to be surrounded by ideas, by people, build a network and all of that. I think that is the critical element. If you're able to foresight your future and put it in the context of where you want to live, what do you want to develop, is work the way you imagine, be able to think about weird things that anything in the future seems ridiculous probably at once. But if you're not a maker of your own game, then it's very difficult that you're going to be able to survive. So I think this would be, if I had to go back, projecting myself, we all grown with accidents that develop our careers. So this could not be accidents. This is something that you can design for your own future.
Thank you, Fernando. Very inspiring advice. And now it's time to finish. Apparently, we don't have more questions. So thank you very much, Fernando, for joining us today. Have a safe, nice trip back to your country, to Mexico, right? And it was a pleasure. And thank you very much also to our audience and the community of Barcelona Technology School. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jordi. Good.